This is part 7 of the Athol 644.5 Swivel Jaw, Swivel Base Vise Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 6, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be cleaning up the jaws, and then we're going to fabricate the handle for the locking pin. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. To clean up the jaws the way that I want to, we're going to need to basically assemble the vise. So here we're installing the key for the swivel jaw, and then the swivel jaw, then the locking pin, and then we're going to install the spindle nut. And I'm actually installing it backwards here, and I didn't realize that at the time. And then the pin. So we'll correct that a little bit later in the video, but I wanted to show that yes, you can put it in backwards and it does not function like it's supposed to. So here we have the dynamic jaw and the spindle. We'll insert the spindle, and then just to the left there you can see we've got the 2 washers and the spring. So we'll slide one of the washers onto the spindle, and then the spring, and then the other washer. And I've taken a piece of PVC pipe. This is a thin wall PVC pipe, so I think it's like a drainage pipe, but it says it's 1 inch. And then I've notched the end of it, and that'll compress all of that down. And then we need to compress it even more so that we can get the cotter pin into that hole. So I'm putting the meatball side of the spindle against my body and kind of pulling that PVC pipe down towards me until I can access the cotter pin hole. But I don't think this would work with like a regular piece of PVC pipe that's got like an 1/8 of an inch thick wall. Like I said, this is a very thin wall PVC pipe. And we'll just insert that cotter pin and then seat it with a punch. Get the PVC out of there. And then install the dynamic jaw. And this is where I realized in a few minutes here that the spindle nut was in backwards. One would think that it shouldn't really matter since it's threaded all the way through, but for whatever reason, it does matter. So I still haven't figured it out at this point, and I'm thinking that the spindle is just binding up on the threads, and we just needed to get it past that initial turn. But once I realized it wasn't going to go and I didn't want to take a chance of stripping or breaking anything, I figured out that that nut is in there backwards. So we'll just tap the pin back out, reverse the nut. There we go. So the angled side goes towards the rear of the vise. Reinsert that pin and seat it. And now the dynamic jaw will go into there, no problem at all. In fact, it turns so easily that I end up removing the handle because one, it keeps bottoming out on the table there, and two, I can turn the meatball by hand and get this thing seated. That is somewhat of a workout on your wrist. Then we'll just tighten it down with the handle. All right, so this should mean that the jaws are lined up right now. So now we're just going to use a cutoff wheel on my angle grinder, and we're going to clean up the edges on the top and the sides of the jaws. So then we'll hit it with a file and try to even it out a little. There are some depressions and markings from it being hit with a variety of tools and stuff that I'm not going to be able to get out. I would have to take the metal down a lot further, and I don't want to do that. So the goal here is just to kind of get them cleaned up and looking decent. And then I've got a Scotch-Brite pad on the angle grinder that I'm using to kind of polish that. See if I can't smooth it a little bit. And then we break out this sander that I have. And I think this is like 80 grit that I'm using on it. And when we paint the vise, we're not going to paint these sides that we're cleaning up. We'll leave them raw. So just getting them looking decent. You can see there's a lot of other tool markings and stuff in the vise, and we're not going to try to clean any of that other stuff up. We want that there. It helps show the age of the vise and gives it some character, in my opinion. So that is as far as we're going to go with that. So this is the patent for the pen, right? And you can see there is a handle there, and we're going to basically be doing the opposite. Whereas the pen had the notch taken out of it, we're going to have the handle taken, the notch taken out of it. That way the pen can be used without the handle if you want, with a wrench like we've been using it so far. So here I have a piece of mild steel, high carbon. I think this is a 5/8 piece. No, 3/4 piece. 3/4 piece. We used 5/8 for the pen, so this needed to be just a little bit bigger. And we're just facing it here. Then we're measuring it out. I'm going to make the handle about 2.5 inches. Doesn't need to be ginormous, and I don't want it to become cumbersome on top of the vise. So we'll just touch off here so I know where we're stopping. And then since we've got basically 3 inches sticking out past the chuck here, we're going to go ahead and center drill this bar. And then we'll put a dead center on that end to keep it from flexing while we're removing material, because we're going to need to remove quite a bit of it. And my lathe is a combination mill and lathe, and I could use the mill to fabricate the notched area of the handle, but I just decided to go with keeping it simple and utilize the drill press and then the bandsaw. So now that we have the dead center inside the work, we can go ahead and start turning down this handle. So I think I'm going to speed ramp a lot of this footage because there's a lot of turning down that we're going to be doing. And I'm going to be taking some fairly deep cuts. So you're going to see some smoke. And I'll take some measurements periodically, but to be honest with you, I'm doing most of this off the cuff and eyeballing a lot of it. So, as I've said several times, I am not a machinist. So we're just going to keep turning down that handle portion. And I don't even remember what diameter we ended up with. I just went until it looked good. And God forbid you need to put a cheater bar or something on it to get that pin out of the vise, you could do that. So here we're just chamfering the edges there. And that is the handle raw. So we're just going to face the other side. I cut that off with the bandsaw, so we just need to face it. And we're good. So here we are at my Craftsman Emerson commercial drill press, and I'm using a center finder for round pipe. You can see that it's got this little Y section on the bottom. Basically, you move the object around until that Y section is aligned with the index marking. Something like that. And this helps you find the center of a round object. And I'm using this drill press as opposed to my 100 series because, as great as my 100 series is, I have a little bit of deflection on the drill bits. So as I start to drill into something, those drill bits can wander about a 1/16 of an inch, and that's Not going to work for what we're doing. I've got the work here clamped inside a cross slide. And that allows me to dial in where that part needs to be. So we'll find the center, and then we'll worry about the if we're saying that we're looking at the X and Y axis. This is the X going left to right, and then the Y is going to be heading towards the 3-in-1 oil can, if you will. But those are the markings that we need to line up. Once we've got that, we should be able to pull that tool out of the chuck and put a drill bit in the chuck, and it should be aligned dead center, or close enough for government work. So now I'm just using the 3/8 bit to get an idea of where we need to drill that hole on the y-axis. And what I didn't realize is that I didn't clamp that work down inside the vise very well, and it's come out of the channel that it rides in, and it's leaning down as I'm drilling into it, which means that this hole is not going to be, straight. It's going to be at an angle. And to a lesser man, that might be a problem. But for me, I'm not going to sweat it, because the next bit that we're going to be using is going to be so much bigger than this bit. This is a 1/8 bit, and that's a 3/8 bit. So we're going 3 times the diameter of the bit. And it's a fairly rigid bit. So as long as we get the very top edge of this hole lined up with the drill bit, which is what we have, and we've got the work clamped inside the vise like it should be now, we can put the larger bit in there, and the larger bit is not going to follow that hole. It's going to make its own hole. And my dog keeps making a cameo in the background there. Now, if we only went up, say, 1/16 of an inch, a smaller bit that's less rigid is going to most likely try to follow the previous hole. And you end up with an issue where you may end up breaking the drill bit off. But in this one, it was no problem. So here we're just going to do the cutout of the notch. So we've got the hole drilled, and we just need to cut the remaining material away, like so. And then over at my 1-inch belt sander, and we're just going to sand down the inside of the notch, clean it up. Then we're going to round the bottom. Now, we probably should have done that on the lathe to begin with, but like I said, I'm doing this off the cuff. No real plan in sight except an idea of how I want it to look. So now we need to drill out the hole for the pin, and again we're using a 1/8 inch bit. Now notice that I haven't punched or done any kind of indexing for these drill bits in the work itself. I'm just taking the drill bit and going straight into it, and there's no deflection. And that's because those Craftsman commercial Emerson drill presses, you can really dial in any take up in there. and get all that slop out of it and just drill perfect holes. Which I have an entire rebuild series on one of these commercial model Craftsman Emerson drill presses. And I'll put a link for videos in that series here. All right, so here we're just cleaning it up with a file a little bit, doing some deburring. I mean, it's not perfect in any way, but it's going to do the job we want it to do and look decent in the process. And we'll take that over to the lathe and then clean up the handle with some dry sanding, just like we did on the pin. We're doing this with, I think that's 80, and then 100, 120, and then 220, and maybe 320. I don't recall. But it's not, we're not trying to polish it. We're just trying to get it to look decent and not be uncomfortable to use. So once we have the handle cleaned up, we're ready to install the pin. So I've got a punch, a 1/8 inch punch in one end, and I've got a 1/8 inch by 3/4 inch pin that I got from McMaster Carr. And of course, these are not oversized pins. It's just a standard 1/8 by 3/4, so it is going to come right out of that sucker. So what we need to do now is I'm going to put it in a pair of vice grips, and I'm going to deform one end of it with a ball peen hammer. And that's just enough to wedge that pin in there. So I was using some shims to kind of even the handle out, but yeah, no big deal. So we'll just drop the pin in, and then we'll seat it with that punch. And that pin is going to stick out the bottom a little bit there. I end up off camera sanding that down flush. But that's the handle, and that's the end of this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. In the next video, I promise we will get to masking and painting. So I just wanted to knock this out, and then we can move forward. As always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.